This happened in February of 2009. I was 24 years old at the time, working on my master's degree in communications at the University of Hartford in Connecticut. My name was Tiana Notice, and I never thought I'd be one of those women. You know the type I'm talking about, the ones you see on the news with restraining orders and security cameras outside their apartments, the ones whose ex-boyfriends just won't let go no matter what they do. But by January of that year, that's exactly who I'd become. I met James online in the spring of 2008. I wasn't really looking for anything serious. My profile on the dating site was pretty basic, just wanting to meet new people, maybe go on a few casual dates. When James messaged me, he seemed normal enough. His profile said he worked in insurance, he had a nice smile in his photos, and his messages were thoughtful without being over the top. We talked for a few weeks before meeting in person, and that first date went really well. He was charming, funny, attentive. He asked questions about my life and actually listened instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. For the first few months, things were genuinely good. James would send me thoughtful texts throughout the day, remember little details about our conversations, bring me coffee when I was stressed about school. My friends liked him. My family thought it was polite and respectful. But then, things started to shift. Nothing dramatic at first. He'd get upset if I didn't respond to his texts right away. He'd want to know where I was, who I was with, when I'd be home. He started showing up places without telling me. My apartment, the university, the coffee shop where I studied. He always had an excuse. He was just in the neighborhood. He wanted to surprise me. About 6 months in, I learned something that made my stomach drop. James had been sentenced for domestic abuse against an ex-girlfriend. He never mentioned it. I only found out from a background check my father ran. When I confronted James, he broke down crying, said it was all a misunderstanding, that his ex had been crazy. He begged me to believe him, promised it would never happen again. And I wanted to believe him. But the truth revealed itself. James became more controlling, more possessive. He'd check my phone when I wasn't looking. He'd accuse me of flirting with other men when I was just being friendly. My father pulled me aside one evening and told me he thought James was cheating, that he'd seen him with another woman.
In late 2008, I ended things. I told him I needed space, that things weren't working. James completely lost it. He started calling me constantly, dozens of times a day. When I stopped answering, he'd leave long, rambling voicemails, some apologetic, begging me to give him another chance, others angry, accusing me of betraying him. The texts were worse, hundreds of them at all hours. By January, I went to the police and filed for a restraining order. The process was humiliating. I had to recount every frightening interaction, every threatening message, every time he'd shown up somewhere he shouldn't be. When the restraining order was approved, I felt relieved. Finally, there would be consequences. James violated the restraining order almost immediately. He'd drive by my apartment, park across the street, just sit there watching my windows. He'd send emails from new addresses. He'd call from blocked numbers. Every time I reported a violation, I was told the same thing. They'd look into it, they'd document it, but nothing ever changed. The police seemed annoyed that I kept coming back. One night, I walked out to find all 4 tires slashed. The cuts were deep, deliberate, angry. When I reported it, they told me it was a property crime because I couldn't prove he'd done it. My father installed a surveillance camera outside my apartment, pointing at the front door and parking area. The camera gave me a small sense of security, but it also made everything feel more real.
The emails James sent in early February were different, more direct, more threatening. In one, he told me not to talk to the police, to drop the restraining order, to stop making his life difficult. The implication was clear. I saved the emails and went to the police station the next day. The officer who met with me seemed tired. It was February 13th, the Friday before Valentine's Day weekend, and they were short-staffed. He looked at the emails, made some notes, and told me he couldn't verify the restraining order in the system. It was a holiday weekend, things were backed up. He'd make some calls, but it might be Monday before anything happened. When I pressed him, he sighed and said they'd call James, warn him about the emails. I left feeling sick. They were going to tip him off that I'd reported him again. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. I kept checking the locks, kept looking out at the empty parking lot. Part of me wanted to drive to my parents' house, but I was so tired of living in fear. This was my apartment, my home. The next day was Valentine's Day. I spent most of it trying to distract myself with schoolwork, but I couldn't focus. When evening came, I needed to pack for an overnight trip planned with friends. I pulled into my apartment complex around 6. The sun had already set, and the February air was bitter cold. The security camera my father had installed was recording, a small red light blinking in the darkness. At least, if anything happened, there'd be proof. I never made it inside. I was reaching for my keys when I heard footsteps behind me, moving fast. Before I could turn around, before I could scream, James was there. I saw the knife for just a split second before the first cut. The pain was immediate, white-hot, radiating through my entire body. I tried to run, tried to fight back, but he was bigger, stronger, and he'd been planning this. I managed to dial 911 as I fell to the ground, my fingers slippery with blood. I told the operator James had stabbed me. I told her I was bleeding. I told her I needed help. Then I just focused on breathing, on staying conscious. The neighbors found me first, kind strangers who held my hands and told me help was coming. The pain was overwhelming, but worse was the knowledge that this was happening because the people who were supposed to protect me had failed. How many times had I gone to the police? How many times had I reported violations? I was stabbed 18 times, twice in the chest, deep wounds that nearly killed me. I spent 2 hours in surgery, doctors working frantically to repair the damage. But despite their best efforts, I died at Hartford Hospital just before midnight. I was 25 years old. It was a week after my birthday. My father found me in the hospital morgue the next day. He had to identify my body, had to see what James had done. In my apartment, among my things, my father found a poem I'd written months earlier about leaving James. I titled it Chapter Closed. In it, I wrote about being free from his temper, his torture, his threats. I'd written, "An empty house in solitude is how he will spend his days, and I rest assured in knowing I'm beautiful, smart, and on my way." James was arrested and charged with murder. In 2012, he was sentenced to 60 years in prison. He didn't even have the courage to attend his own sentencing. After my death, my father created the Tiana Angelique Notice Foundation in my name. He fought to change domestic violence laws in Connecticut to make it harder for cases like mine to slip through the cracks. Because of my story, laws changed. Because of my death, other women might be saved. But I'm still gone. And every Valentine's Day, instead of celebrating love, my family mourns the daughter they lost because the system that should have protected me decided my life wasn't worth the paperwork. February 14th, 2013, started like any other morning in our household in Peoria, Illinois. My husband Nathan woke our 3 children up early, made them breakfast, and set out the Valentine's Day sacks I prepared the night before. Seth, Julia, and Janelle sat at the kitchen table that morning, excited and happy, pulling out their gifts. Nathan had bought me roses the night before. Everything seemed normal, but it wasn't. My name was Denise Lutholt, and I was 39 years old. I'd known Nathan since elementary school at Faith Baptist Christian School. We were childhood sweethearts who'd built a life together, traveled the world doing missionary work, raised 3 beautiful children. On the surface, we had everything. The truth was more complicated. We met when I was in 4th grade and he was in 3rd. We married in July of 1995 when I was 21. A year later, Nathan convinced me to move to Lithuania to work as missionaries. We spent years there starting churches, helping communities. It was during one of those trips that we met Ina Dobilite. She was a young Lithuanian woman who loved music just like I did. Her family was involved in the church, and Ina helped with our children constantly. The kids adored her. She felt like family. When we returned to the United States in 2010, Nathan and I sponsored Ina to come study at a Christian college in Florida. We wanted to help her build a future. I didn't know about the hotel visits in Pensacola, the trips to Europe, the constant text messages, the expensive gifts. I didn't know that Nathan had rented an apartment in Chicago just to be closer to Ina, or about the spa appointments he'd pay for, or the intimate messages he was sending to this 20-year-old girl. But I was starting to suspect something. In the weeks before Valentine's Day, Nathan was distant, distracted, always on his phone. When I'd ask who he was texting, he'd give vague answers. Once I found him sitting in the dark in our living room in the middle of the night, just staring at nothing. In my diary, I wrote, "What on earth could you possibly be thinking?" I never got to ask, because on Valentine's Day, Nathan made a choice that would end my life. That morning, after the kids left for school with their Valentine's bags, I dropped our youngest daughter at daycare. Nathan said he had errands to run, things to pick up for Valentine's Day. He mentioned getting me a gift card to a spa. I kissed him goodbye, told him I loved him, and drove our daughter to daycare. It was such a normal morning. After dropping her off, I drove back to my parents' house where we'd been staying temporarily. We'd recently returned from Lithuania and were living with my mom and dad while we figured out our next steps. The house was quiet when I pulled into the garage around midday. My parents were out. I grabbed my purse, locked the car, and walked toward the door. My keys were in my hand. My coat was still buttoned against the cold. My gloves were still on. I never made it past the entryway. Medical examiners would later testify that the bullet struck me so fast, so precisely, that I probably didn't feel pain, that I didn't have time to understand what was happening, that I didn't even have a chance to scream. The .40 caliber Glock my husband owned fired a single shot directly into my head at close range. I collapsed immediately, right there just inside the front door, my keys still clutched underneath me. Nathan called 911 at 3:15 that afternoon, more than 3 hours after I was killed. His voice on the recorded call was eerily calm. He told the dispatcher there appeared to have been a break-in at his in-laws' house, that the garage door was open and there was broken glass. He said he'd taken his daughter to the neighbors and needed police to check things out. He never mentioned that his wife was lying dead inside. He never sounded panicked or afraid, just calm, just matter of fact. When police arrived, they found me immediately. Officer Richard Linthicum walked through the front door and saw my body, saw the staged crime scene that was supposed to look like a burglary. He knew right away something wasn't right. Kitchen cabinets were open, drawers were dumped on the floor, but expensive electronics sat untouched. Only 3 specific pieces of jewelry were missing from my jewelry box, pieces someone would only know to take if they knew they had value. The broken window near an exterior door looked forced, but the glass pattern didn't match a real break-in. I felt that this was not an ordinary burglary, Officer Linthicum would later testify. The investigators zeroed in on Nathan almost immediately. His story didn't add up. He claimed he'd gone to a spa that morning to buy me a gift card. But when detectives talked to spa employees, they said Nathan rarely came in for me. They did, however, see him constantly with Ina Dobilite. He'd drive her to appointments, pay for her services, wait while she got waxed and pampered. One employee told detectives, "My stuff would be in the front yard if my wife found out I was waxing up a 20-year-old. It just didn't make no sense." Then there was Nathan's computer. Investigators found searches for how to muffle a gun, hitting someone over the head to knock them out, and lethal injection. They found text messages between Nathan and Ina from Valentine's Day morning, sweet and flirtatious. At 3 p.m., right around when I was killed, Nathan sent Ina a text saying police believed there'd been a burglary at the Newton house. She replied with one word in Lithuanian, "Interesting," followed by a smiley face. Neighbors reported seeing a man walking near our house around the time of the murder, white, wearing a black hooded sweatshirt despite the cold, hood pulled up, head down. He had stubble, looked scruffy and out of place. The description matched Nathan perfectly. Cell phone records showed his phone pinging off towers near the house during the time I was killed, even though he claimed to be across town. My car was found abandoned at Robinson Park with a spare key in a trash can. One of the most damning pieces of evidence came from Nathan's own mouth. While in jail waiting for trial, Nathan befriended an older inmate who had a reputation for being knowledgeable about legal matters. Nathan sought his advice, at first speaking in hypotheticals, but eventually, on a handshake agreement of confidentiality, Nathan confessed everything. He told the inmate I could be overbearing at times, that he'd met a young woman, that he'd decided to make a sort of Valentine's Day present to this other woman by killing me. He'd considered poisoning me before settling on the gunshot. At his trial in 2014, prosecutors laid out the case piece by piece. The fake burglary, the calculated timing, the relationship with Ina, the internet searches, the cell phone evidence, the jailhouse confession. State's Attorney Jerry Brady called my murder a Valentine's Day present to Ina Gabileta, a twisted gift from a man who decided his mistress was more important than his wife, his children, or his supposedly godly life.
The jury saw through Nathan's defense. In just 90 minutes, they found him guilty of first-degree murder. Judge Kevin Lyons sentenced him to 80 years in prison, telling Nathan he'd poisoned his otherwise law-abiding life. He called Nathan a thief for robbing our children of their mother. "You will end your life in a cold and gray and isolated Illinois penitentiary where you will be more of a number than a name," Judge Lyons said. My parents provided victim impact statements that broke everyone in the courtroom. My mother asked through tears, why would a burglar know that those were the only 3 valuable rings? She knew, of course, because it wasn't a burglar. It was her son-in-law. "We are repulsed at his calculated evil scheming," my parents said. "He has robbed us of the rest of our daughter's life. We've had to wrestle with Nathan's hypocrisy in claiming to be a man of God." Nathan maintains his innocence to this day. He's appealed his conviction, filed motion after motion, insisted he never had an affair with Ina, never planned my death. But the evidence doesn't lie. On Valentine's Day 2013, the man I'd loved since elementary school, the man I'd traveled the world with, the man I'd built a life with and raised 3 children with, decided I was in the way, and he removed me.
I think about my children sometimes. Seth, Julia, and Janelle, who woke up that Valentine's morning so excited, completely unaware that by day's end they'd be motherless. I think about how they'll carry this trauma forever, knowing their father murdered their mother. And I think about Ina, the young woman we'd sponsored and helped. Did she know Nathan was planning to kill me? That text message she sent when he told her about my death, that single word, interesting, with a smiley face, suggests she wasn't surprised. My death didn't have to happen. If Nathan had asked for a divorce, if he'd been honest, if he'd made any choice other than murder, I'd still be alive. My children would still have their mother. My parents wouldn't have to visit my grave on Valentine's Day. But Nathan didn't want the messiness of divorce. He wanted a clean slate with his young mistress, and he was willing to kill for it. So now Nathan sits in an Illinois penitentiary serving his 80-year sentence. And I'm buried in Peoria, my life cut short at 39, forever associated with a holiday that should represent love, but for my family will always represent betrayal and murder. This happened in February of 2018. I was 28 years old, living alone in a decent apartment on the east side of the city. I worked as a graphic designer for a tech startup. Valentine's Day was approaching, and honestly, I wasn't feeling great about it. I'd been single for about 6 months after a rough breakup, and all my friends were coupled up, making big romantic plans. I didn't want to spend the night alone watching Netflix and eating takeout. So I downloaded a dating app. I matched with a guy named Alex within a few hours. That's not his real name, but for this story, that's what I'll call him. His profile looked normal. He was good-looking in that effortlessly charming way some men have, and his bio was funny without trying too hard. He said he worked in tech, liked hiking and live music, was looking for something real. Our first conversation was easy, natural. We talked about favorite bands, places we'd traveled, books we'd both read. He asked thoughtful questions and actually seemed to listen. After a few days, he suggested we meet for coffee. Nothing fancy, just coffee at a local shop downtown. That first date went really well. Alex was just as charming in person, maybe even more so. He made me laugh, shared funny stories about his job, asked about my work, and seemed genuinely interested. By the time we left 2 hours later, I was already hoping there'd be a second date. When he texted that night to say he'd had a great time, I was honestly pretty excited. Our second date was dinner at an Italian place. Third was a concert. By the fourth date, I was starting to think this could actually go somewhere. Alex was attentive, romantic, always texting to ask how my day was going. He remembered small details I'd mentioned, like my favorite flower or the name of my childhood dog. Everything felt right. But there were moments, little glimpses of something underneath that made me pause. Once, when we were out for drinks, a guy at the bar made eye contact with me and smiled, just a friendly acknowledgement. But Alex noticed. His entire demeanor shifted. He went quiet, his jaw tightened, and when I asked what was wrong, he accused me of flirting. It escalated into an argument that left me feeling confused and guilty, even though I hadn't done anything. He apologized later, said he'd overreacted, that he just cared about me so much. Another time, Alex showed up at my apartment unannounced. I'd told him I had a work deadline and needed to stay home and focus, but he appeared at my door with takeout and wine, saying he thought I might need a break. When I gently told him I really did need to work, he got upset. Not angry exactly, but hurt in this manipulative way that made me feel cruel. He left, but not before making me feel like I'd ruined his whole evening. Red flags, right? But when you're in it, when someone is showering you with affection, it's easy to rationalize. Everyone has bad days. Everyone gets insecure. I told myself Alex just needed to learn my boundaries. By early February, we'd been dating about 3 months. Valentine's Day was approaching, and Alex was already making plans. He wanted to do something special, he said, something memorable. He reserved a table at an expensive restaurant downtown, told me to dress up, promised it would be a night I'd never forget. I bought a new dress, got my hair done, spent way too much money because I wanted to look perfect. Valentine's Day started off okay. Alex picked me up at 7, looking sharp in a suit I'd never seen before. He complimented me, opened the car door, acted like the perfect gentleman. The restaurant was beautiful, all dim lighting and white tablecloths and couples leaning close. We ordered wine, studied the menu, and for a while everything seemed fine. But as the evening went on, I started noticing things. Alex kept checking his phone, even though he'd made a big deal about how tonight was just about us. When I asked who he was texting, he snapped at me, said it was just work stuff. His mood seemed off, like he was distracted or upset about something he wasn't telling me. I tried to engage him in conversation, but his answers were short, clipped, and the romantic atmosphere was rapidly dissolving into tension. Halfway through dinner, Alex excused himself to use the restroom. He was gone for almost 15 minutes. When he came back, his eyes looked red and his whole demeanor had changed. He seemed agitated, anxious, like he was barely holding himself together. I asked if he was okay, and he insisted he was fine, but everything about his body language said otherwise. We finished dinner mostly in silence. The drive back to my apartment was even worse. Alex didn't say a word, just stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. When I tried to ask what was going on, he told me to just drop it. His voice was cold, empty. When we got to my building, I honestly just wanted the night to be over. I thanked him for dinner, told him I hoped he felt better, and reached for the door handle. But before I could get out, Alex grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to stop me. He asked if he could come inside, said we needed to talk, that he didn't want the night to end on a bad note. Every instinct I had screamed at me to say no, to get out of that car, go inside alone, and lock the door. But I also felt guilty, like maybe I'd misread the situation. So, against my better judgment, I said yes. Big mistake. We walked up to my apartment in silence. I unlocked the door, flipped on the lights, offered to make coffee. Alex didn't respond. He just walked past me into my living room and started pacing, running his hands through his hair, muttering to himself. I stood in the doorway watching him, genuinely confused and starting to get scared. This wasn't the man I'd been dating. This was someone else entirely. "Alex?" I said quietly. "What's going on?" He stopped pacing and turned to look at me. The expression on his face was something I'll never forget. It wasn't anger exactly, though there was anger there. It was more like emptiness, like he'd completely disconnected from reality. "You don't love me," he said. Not a question, a statement. "What? Alex, where's this coming from?" "You've been distant all night. You barely talked to me at dinner. You're already pulling away, aren't you? You are going to leave me just like everyone else." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my heart was pounding. "I wasn't looking at my phone. You were the one who seemed distant." That was the wrong thing to say. Alex's face twisted into something ugly, and suddenly he was moving toward me, closing the space in 2 quick strides. I backed up instinctively, but there was nowhere to go. My back hit the wall, and Alex was right there, inches from my face, breathing hard. "Don't lie to me. Don't you dare lie to me." "I'm not lying. Alex, you're scaring me. I think you should leave." "Leave?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You'd like that, wouldn't you? You want me gone so you can call whoever you've been texting." "I haven't been texting anyone. Alex, please, just calm down." But he wasn't listening. He started ranting about how he'd given me everything, how he'd been nothing but good to me, how I was ungrateful and cold. I tried to stay calm, tried to reason with him, but nothing I said made any difference. He was spiraling. Then he grabbed me, both hands on my shoulders, fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. I tried to pull away, but he was stronger, and the look in his eyes was absolutely terrifying. "You're not leaving me," Alex said, his face so close to mine I could smell the wine on his breath. "I won't let you." That's when I knew I was in serious danger. My phone was in my purse by the door. If I could just get to it, maybe someone would help me. But Alex was blocking my path. "Okay," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. I do love you. I'm not going anywhere." His grip loosened slightly. "You mean that?" "Yes, I mean it. I was just tired tonight, that's all. Work has been stressful, but I'm here now and we're together, and that's what matters." Alex studied my face, trying to determine if I was telling the truth. For a moment, I thought he might believe me, but then his expression hardened again. "You're a liar," he said quietly. "You're all liars." What happened next is kind of a blur. Alex shoved me hard against the wall, hard enough that I hit my head and saw stars. I heard glass breaking, realized he'd thrown something. My instincts took over and I started fighting back, scratching, kicking, screaming as loud as I could, hoping a neighbor might hear. We struggled for what felt like forever, but was probably only seconds. I managed to get my knee up, caught him in the stomach, and when he doubled over, I ran. I didn't make it to my phone, didn't even try. I just bolted for the front door, ripped it open, and ran out into the hallway screaming for help. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, opened her door and immediately called 911 when she saw me. Alex appeared in my doorway a second later, looking disheveled and wild, but when he saw Mrs. Chen on the phone with police, something in him seemed to snap back to reality. He turned and ran down the back stairs. Police arrived within minutes. They took my statement, photographed the bruises on my shoulders and the cut on my head where I'd hit the wall, searched my apartment for evidence. They found the wine glass Alex had thrown shattered against my kitchen counter. They found scratches in the hallway wall where I'd grabbed for purchase while running. They found enough to arrest him. But Alex had disappeared. For weeks after that Valentine's Day, I stayed with friends, changed my locks, filed for a restraining order. I looked over my shoulder constantly, jumped at every unexpected noise, barely slept. The police eventually caught up with him 2 states away. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison. But even knowing he was locked up didn't make me feel safe, because in 3 years, he'd be out again. It's been over 5 years now, and I've done my best to move on. I've gone to therapy, worked through the trauma, learned to trust people again. But I'll never forget that Valentine's Day. The way Alex's face changed when he snapped. The feeling of his hands on my shoulders. The terror of being trapped in my own home with someone who'd completely lost control. Valentine's Day was supposed to be about love, about romance. But for me, it'll always be a reminder that sometimes the person you let into your heart is the person who wants to destroy you. If you're in a relationship that doesn't feel right, if someone is showing warning signs, please listen to your instincts. Don't make excuses for bad behavior. Don't convince yourself it'll get better. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, run, fight, scream, do whatever it takes to survive. Because Valentine's Day should be about love, not fear. And no one deserves to spend the most romantic day of the year fighting for their life. 3 women, 3 Valentine's Days, 3 families left with empty chairs at the dinner table and flowers they'll never receive. Right now, somewhere, someone is planning a romantic Valentine's Day dinner with a person who's already decided they won't see February 15th. Someone is ignoring warning signs because they want to believe love conquers all. Someone is filing a restraining order that won't be worth the paper it's printed on. The stories don't end just because mine did. They never do. If you found yourself checking your locks while listening to this, there are more stories waiting. Real ones. The kind that make you realize that monsters don't hide under beds. They send good morning texts and buy you coffee and tell you they can't live without you. Subscribe if you want more, or don't. Either way, these stories will still be happening tomorrow, and the day after that, and next Valentine's Day. Stay safe out there, or try to.